So these are all the ingredients and some of the spices you might like to use for today's black bean soup. We have a shallot, 2 cloves of garlic, about 4 ounces of mushrooms, 1 carrot. I'm going to use 2 cups of vegetable stock, but you're welcome to use whatever kind of stock you want. 1 can of black beans, and then I arranged some of my favorite spices that I like with beans. I like my black bean soup to be pretty spicy, so I have some crushed red peppers, some cayenne. I broke out the paprika. If you don't happen to have paprika but you want a little bit of that fun flavor, maybe you have some chili powder, and then for a nice little touch, some extra garlic salt and some oregano. Take a couple minutes to chop up these vegetables as finely as you want to. Remember, you have the option to use that stick blender to really grind things up, make things nice and smooth at the end. So don't feel like you have to be too exact in your chopping of the vegetables. Just have fun, and let's start putting some food in a pot. So I have diced up the shallots and the carrots, which will go into the pot first, followed by the mushrooms and the garlic. While this is all cooking up, I'll start adding some of the spices. I like to get the spices in there early so they can really start flavoring things up. Then we'll add in the black beans and the cooking stock. You can always add more spices later, but I do recommend that you start adding some salt and some flavoring in the beginning to I like to prep everything before I get started. I'm a big advocate for cleaning up along the way while you're cooking. I think it makes cooking in general so much easier, especially when your space is pretty clean. As you can see, I have a really limited space in my kitchen, so I also happen to have a little trash bag or bowl so that I can continue to be cleaning up as I'm going along, and then you can dump out that trash bowl later. So your vegetables are all chopped, and the next thing that you do is come over to your stove. I've got a nice pot that has a lid option because I like to let my soup simmer for a little while to really infuse the flavor. So starting off, just turn your burner on. I like to let the pot get a little warm, and then we're going do. Everything is already cut up on the tray, so you can easily just gently start to push some things into your pot. Waiting to hear a little bit of a sizzle sound. Next up, we're going to add some olive oil to get things really cooking. Okay, so I hear the gentle sizzle of the shallots, or perhaps you're using onions because that's what you have at home. Next, I'm going to add about a tablespoon of olive oil, just so it has a little bit of fat to be cooking in. And then I'll start to stir things up. I like to use a spatula in my pot so that I don't scrape it too much. And as those onions are starting to cook down, I'm going to add just a little pinch of salt. A little hint of cayenne because I like things to be spicy. I'm really into garlic, so extra garlic salt. If you don't have paprika and you just kind of want to add that delicious flavor, you can always think about adding a little hint of chili powder. Next, I'm going to put in a dash of oregano. But please, feel welcome to riff a little bit and add whatever seasonings you have. And the last seasoning I'm going to add for right now is just a little hint of crushed red pepper. So while this is all starting to cook up and smell absolutely delicious, the next thing I'm going to throw into the pot will be the carrots. Letting the carrots cook down for maybe a minute or two. You might find that you need to add a little bit more oil into your pot if things look really dry. If you are adding mushrooms like me, keep in mind that something like mushrooms are also going to break down a bit and add a little bit more moisture to your pot. And if you don't want to use any oil at all, you can always always think about just adding a little bit of the broth from the vegetable stock into your soup. The last vegetable I'm placing in here is going to be the garlic. However, if you have other vegetables in your fridge or on your countertops that are starting to go bad, think about throwing in some peppers. Maybe even adding a can of tomatoes if that's your jam. Next up, we're going to add our can of black beans. I don't like to rinse the black beans, especially for the soup. I think there's just so much flavor in the liquid within the black beans. If that makes you uncomfortable, you're welcome to get rid of it, but it's such a great thickener for the soup. And then I'm going to take about one can's worth of vegetable broth. I'm going to rinse my can out just to get all of those delicious flavors in there. Basically, we're just trying to add enough broth to cover up the beans and the vegetables in our pot. From here, keep the temperature a little high. Bring your pot of black bean soup to a boil, and once it comes to a boil, lower the temperature, add a lid, and let it simmer for at least 30 minutes. The longer that you let it simmer and sit, the more that the flavors are gonna really meld together and just be extra delicious. Things are starting to come to a boil, so turn the temperature of your soup down to a simmer. Use a spoon, or if no one else is going to eat it, go ahead and just take a little taste of your spatula. See if the flavors are good, or if you want to add any extra spices. And then with the temperature turned down, we're going to add a lid to the pot. And then set a timer for about 30 minutes so you can come back and blend up your soup. Okay, so 30 minutes have gone by and our soup is delightfully boiling, and you'll see that a lot of the veggies have popped up to the top. I don't like a super chunky black bean soup, but if you do, you can eat it now. I like mine to be creamy, so I'm going to bring my stick blender to the party and just blend up the top layer. Yay, so here we are with our delightfully blended soup. I've set another timer for 30 minutes just to continue to let the flavors meld. Make sure things are down on a nice low simmer, and let's put the top back on. While your soup finishes its last round of heating up and flavor melding, start thinking towards what awesome ingredients you want to add to finish the flavor and your fullness. I'm a vegetarian, so for me to make this a complete protein, I'm going to add some rice. If you wanted to add even extra protein, you might think towards adding some quinoa. Alternately, you could top it with some cooked shrimp, with some chicken, maybe even some tofu. Check back on your pot about halfway through this second simmer. Give it a little stir, especially if you have trouble controlling the temperature of your stove. You just want to make sure that your beans aren't sticking to the bottom, that you have enough broth going, that things aren't too thick. If your pot does seem to be extra thick because you had a lot of vegetables, you can always think towards adding a little extra broth. It's almost time to eat. Okay, it's that magical time. So turn your stove top off. I love the taste of a little bit of cooking sherry in my black bean soup. So I'm just gonna add a teeny little splash, maybe about a teaspoon. Take my amazing Loch Ness soup server, give it a nice quick stir. I'm gonna add about 2 scoops of my black bean soup. Then I already warmed up some rice in the microwave. Normally I am that gal who would totally make her own rice or quinoa. but today I didn't really feel the need. And just put a couple scoops of rice in here as well, just so it's a little bit more filling. Topping things off with about a tablespoon of chopped red onions for an extra crunch, and just a pinch of cheese. Just a pinch of cheese. Bam! Awesome! Here we are, a delightful bowl of black bean soup. Now for our final step, which is to just sit down and enjoy the delicious lunch you made. One of the things I really appreciate about the soup is that we used a lot of convenient foods to make it happen. A can of black beans, the bag of already pre-cooked rice that just had to be warmed up. Because there was so much time for the food to be cooking, you could always go and help any little people in your house, sit down at your computer, get a little extra work done, and then still be able to enjoy a delightful, we'll say home-cooked meal. Let's take a bite together. Mine turned out to be super spectacular. I hope that you feel the same way. May you enjoy the soup as much as I do. Have a wonderful lunch and a great rest of your day.